Can I bring a horror aspect into miniatures? Flesh-Eaters are the perfect opportunity to find that out. Cannibalistic, feverish, and completely deranged, these once-a-humans see the world through their chivalrous delusion, but I will portray them as they truly are. So in this video, I'll share with you my motivation, painting tricks and approaches to painting the sickly flesh of ghouls from Flesh-Eater's Spearhead box, balancing stylization and realistic elements. I'm Echoes of Vermin, and you are watching the Grimdark Compendium. Let's briefly go over my motivations behind the sickly flesh. As a reference, I created a small mood board to draw the inspiration from before deciding on the color of the ghoulish skin, and I found myself gravitating to the green or yellow tones paired with a crimson and black shadows. I think I was drawn to it thematically because it is also a very similar color palette to Spoiled Flesh, which was also included in my research, so you don't have to. The mood I want these deranged cannibals to carry is that of the old Warhammer fantasy art, paired with the analog horror weirdness. A ghoul is not truly an undead creature like a raised zombie, but a deranged person filled with disease and physical needs to feed. The first steps to painting are your priming stage. I primed the entire miniature with Steiner's Grey, followed by an AK Black from below and Liquitex Titanium White ink from top. The black faint 1:1 with thinner and with just a drop of flow improver, all through an airbrush at around 30 psi and with 2mm needle. I almost exclusively use 2mm needle, as it gives me most control. While the grey primer serves as a sort of middle tone, connecting the black and white, I did this mainly because I did not have the black primer on me. You could easily get the same result with just a black primer and white ink or 2 rattle cans. The white ink is important though, as most white paints will be very speckly through an airbrush, unless very thinned. White ink keeps opacity and smoothness. So, to reiterate, I pick up all raised areas with the white ink while leaving the shadows black. We are creating sort of a sketch of volumes here, which we will build upon with more translucent paints. Getting this sketch right is imperative to keep the deepest shadows almost in true black. The 3 main colors we want the skin to be is green, red and black. Black is already there, so let's add another. I tilt the model so I can spray Berserker Bloodshade from below in short bursts, little by little, so I avoid webbing and let the applied layer quickly dry. What this will do is create reddish shadows, turning lighter over the white and dark over the black. It's basically filtering over the shadows, tinting them into red. I also apply the Bloodshade in 3 to 4 layers over the feet, knees and hands, or like the claws that this crypt flare has, to give some variation to the body. Washes and contrast paints don't need much thinning, if at all, through an airbrush, but what can happen is paint suddenly not flowing. For me, the issue is paint drying on top of the needle, clogging the way. To solve this, just have a wet toothbrush at hand and keep the needle wet and clean. Be careful though not to bend the needle. Now just reapply white on highlights that need re-establishing and get some violet ink in the deepest shadows, like in the armpits. This is just a little touch to give variation to the red, completely optional. Once we have these smooth volumes in, it's time to add mottling to the skin. This will create small dots and patterns you would find in the real skin, making the model look more alive, believable. You can spatter these with a brush, but what I do is load up the black paint and lower my PSI to almost 0 in my airbrush. The paint will stop atomizing without the proper pressure, and it will spatter on purpose. I'm adding the black mottling now because in the next step, when I apply Gut Ripper Flesh, basically over all of the miniature, they will be blended in with the green, same as the other colors. Adding the green all over in around 2 thin coats filter the white parts into green, while it also unifies it with the red, purple and black. But this unification comes at a price and it will dull the colors down, so I just reapply the bloodshade into recesses. What this creates is the bloodshade with the slightest tint of violet transitioning into the green. Make sure to spray a little of the bloodshade into each ulcer too, simulating infected skin. From a purely stylistic angle, I also make the spine area black, bringing the color back into the scheme and lowering PSI to create mottling transition into the green. The ulcers should look like they are full of pus, and for that I dot or stipple on off-white color, like pale sand. The same color is also used for skulls, bone, teeth and claws. Anything bony. To tie the ulcers to the skin more, give them sort of like a pin wash of Berserker bloodshade, only into the recesses. We want these to look really infected. The bones get a quick 3-color approach, with pale sand as base coat, a wash of Agrax Earthshade, thinned 1-to-1 with water to flow better and to make sure recesses are nice and dark, and glazing of Skeleton Horde contrast between the Agrax and the pale sand. This will bring a yellowy color that would appear on an old bone. After each of these steps, the bony parts get a dry brush of pale sand, making sure to keep it in the highlights. I don't spend much time on scars, simply highlighting them in a thin layer of Bugman's Glow. This color is pretty fleshy and ties in with the shadows that we have established. Now that our acrylic stage of skin and bone is set, let's jump into the enamels and oils. For general shading and re-establishing black in the recesses, I will use Decrepit Filth, thinned 1-to-1 with mineral spirits. Thinning enamel washes helps them flow into recesses, like you can see here on the thigh and ribs, but Villainy inks can also be applied neat. As with any washes, it's important to watch how they pool and not apply too much. Here for example, I'd say I applied like 30-20% too much, but I will show you in the moment how to fix that if you do. The enamels have a big advantage over acrylic washes, like their drying time, which leaves them workable for hours before they are fully cured. While curing, they can be moved and reactivated with mineral spirits. We call this the reductive technique. The reductive technique is taking an absorbent tool, such as Q-tip, makeup sponge or a brush, dipping it in the mineral spirits and reactivating and absorbing the excess enamel. Two things are happening here. With light touches, I'm revealing the highlights while also pushing the enamel into recesses. The reductive technique is something a little misunderstood, as I feel people either manipulate too little of the enamel or remove too much. I know I did when I started out with enamels. Respect the reductive technique, don't do it without any thought. It's the step that lets you completely control the enamel. Clean it from highlights, push it around, and don't completely remove or flood it with tons of mineral spirits. You want some of the shading and granulation to stay. You can take your time with this type of paint, no need to rush with the cleaning stage. The capillary effect of mineral spirits can create these hard lines of enamel, patterns that we don't want to see on skin. If they are too hard to reach with a Q-tip, just grab a brush moistened with mineral spirits and break up the line, manipulating the pigment around and blending it. Or just pushing it into the recess more in a way that doesn't create a line. A dry tool, such as a dry Q-tip, can too be used to move an enamel. Dry Q-tip will not reactivate the enamel, as there is no mineral spirits, but it will smear the enamel and move it, which will let it blend and drag it, smoothing transitions. But Q-tips inevitably leave behind some loose hair, so pick them out with tweezers or carefully brush them off with very soft brush. Be careful, because with too much pressure you can still move the enamel. So after this step, I could stop right here and have the skin at a basic but decent level. But I'm gonna push it further with just a few oils and enamels for like a really good level paint job. For highlights at this stage, I'll use oil paints. Specifically, I load up Abteilung 502 buff and then wipe away most of it into a tissue, so I have very little left in the brush. Highlight raised areas in either a stippling or dragging motion, targeting a middle of each highlight. You can also be less controlled with it and basically dry brush the oil on if you like. You don't want to apply too strong of a layer, because we want for the previous colors to show through, as oils are semi-transparent, highlighting on top while also desaturating the colors. Once I have a highlight in the place, I grab a soft, clean brush and with a feathering motion spread the oil around, but leaving some opacity at the top of the highlights. You have to know when to stop with feathering the oil, because if you do too much, the effect will be like greatly diminished. Remember, you want to spread it around and thin it into a, well, thin layer, but you also want some highlights to stay, and not just cover the entire area. Also, since the enamel is uncured, it will naturally react and blend with the oil paint, softening the transitions even more, feathering the edges and burnishing the oil into a smooth layer. Take note that I'm not moving my brush willy-nilly all over the place, but rather targeting spots where I see the oil being too opaque, and at the oil edges, or like at the edges of the highlights, blending with the enamel and creating transitions. I do the same process with a second oil highlight, a 1-to-1 mix of our previous color, Abteilung Buff, and Abteilung Snow White, targeting only some of the highlights, like the face, head, shoulders, thighs and pecs, basically only the parts that I want to highlight more and be more pronounced. Oils can be built in opacity with a few layers, and controlling how much you feather, but don't overdo it. Let the previous layers show through. Color variation is what we want for the skin. Now I'm once again bringing back the red, this time with Caput Mortuum, a dark red enamel. And you could say, wait, wouldn't the enamel react with the burnished oil layer? And you would be exactly right. Thing is, I want this reaction to happen, so the enamel naturally blends in with the oil by itself. But I'm minimizing the reaction, being deliberate in the application to target only recesses where there isn't much oil and using the enamel neat, without any mineral spirits, making it thicker and less reactive. Also more controlled. I'm targeting places of the skin where I want the redness to be, like under arms, face, ulcers, knees, and generally where the skin would stretch and be inflamed. The Ghouls don't have healthy bodies, and its muscles are full of infections and maddening fever. So I imagine like where there is excessive movement, there is also inflammation and pure infection. After letting it dry for a moment, you can notice that the Caput Mortuum by itself turned into this paler, desaturated red, and that's the oil that reacted with it. There are some hard lines present, so to blend them, I grab a Q-tip, a dry Q-tip, and pull the Caput Mortuum and oil together, similar as you would with wet blending. No mineral spirit present, I don't want to remove anything, I simply create transitions. Something I've noticed at this stage is that I've applied too strong of an oil layer, and you can see that the green is almost completely desaturated, covered with oil. But even at this stage, Thanks to the oils and enamels not being cured yet, I can come with mineral spirits and remove the oil layer. This will reveal some of the sickly green back. I leave the top highlights alone and just focus on some selective spots. This removal broke some of the transitions, so after the mineral spirits have evaporated from the model, I come back with a dry Q-tip to blend the remaining oil and enamel back into those transitions. This is what's great about oils and enamels, they offer you a complete control over them for hours on end. After that, I'm gonna use Blighted Ochre, which is this yellowy Villainy Ink, to cover the ulcers and make them into a color of an old pus that's right under the skin. This enamel effect is very slight, made for specifically this kind of glazing application. As for the eyes, it's very straightforward, but I'm gonna give you some quick tips for painting eyes. But just a quick shout out before that. If you enjoy what we do, the best way to support us is through the Grimdark Compendium website. Alongside a huge library of painting tutorials, our winter sale is happening right now, with deals like winter packs, learn Grimdark bundles, and lifetime membership for the lowest price it will ever be, which allows you streaming the entire library of courses forever, both future and past courses. Feel free to check it out if it interests you, as some of the deals are up only until the end of the year. And as always, the support you guys keep showing us is incredible, and we appreciate it greatly, truly. If you are painting for gaming purposes, I think it's fine to ignore eyes altogether, but something in me always pushes me into making that detailed step, much to my frustration sometimes. Eyes can give so much expression to the minis and really breathe life into them. So, how to paint them? I base coat the eyes in the same pale sand, dabbing on the eyeballs with a small brush. You rarely want to use pure white, so make sure to grab an off-white color like this. Just be wary of the paint drying in a matter of several seconds on your brush when using very small brushes like this, because they don't hold much moisture. But that might be just because I'm painting right under a warm lamp. If you make a mistake, you can quickly remove it with a wet brush or cover it up later, don't worry. Now with the white painted, I will make small movements with black paint loaded, trying to hit either a center of the eyeball or whatever angle you want the miniature to be looking at. It's important to get both eyes looking at the same angle, and believe me, I know how hard it is. I'm always cursed to paint only one eye perfectly, but this second one is too small to have a pupil, so I'm spared of that. I like to have very human eyes on Flesh-Eaters, you know? Sort of like a mirror to the soul. They may be deranged, ghoulish creatures of the cannibalistic nature, but inside their sickly bodies is a human mind, be it deranged. We can show that through the eyes, with reflecting intelligence. If the pupil is a weird shape or is too big, you can carefully fix the shape with pale sand again. Once this is done, let's just create an irritated eye look with Berserker Bloodshade, followed by a null oil, which will really darken the space around the eyeball. What you could also do is refine some of the recesses with acrylic washes at this stage on the skin, as the acrylics won't react with the oil and enamels. But this step is completely optional, I just like to do it. Look at this crazy eye. All eyes are wet, reflective surfaces, so I also give it a layer of gloss varnish, alongside the open mouth, simulating saliva. Speaking of varnishes, the entire skin is sort of matte and flat. Skin and flesh is supposed to be quite satin, reflecting a bit of light, but I want this effect to be even more pronounced, almost like the skin of the ghoul is sweaty and feverish, ravaged by infection and madness. Not all satin varnishes are equal though. And the one from Vallejo I'm using is almost in a realm of glossy, but not quite, so it's perfect for this purpose. I load up my brush with the varnish, almost like I would want to dry brush with it, and sort of start roughly highlighting the entire skin. I'm not looking for a smooth coverage, but a varied look, so the satin spots sit right next to some matte ones, etc. This is something we call surface finish variation, and is super important to have for models to look alive. Or well, dead, but you know what I mean. I push this even more with some glossy effects of blood, pus and gore, and the skin recipe is finished. Now you should have some idea of how well and easily can enamels and oils work together on top of a good and varied acrylic sketch, creating sickly skin of the deranged knights and serfs. This has been only the first ceremony, knighting this chivalrous warrior, but I'm going to show you much more in the following ceremonies, so you are completely prepared to render the Flesh-Eater Courts Spearhead box in the Grimdark style with just what's in it, a few skulls and some mundane materials. Save your appetite till then. This has been your humble servant, Echoes of Vermin, and you've been watching the Grimdark Compendium. Take care.